the rest of section 2.6, 2.7. We're solving polynomials by factoring. We're going to use the greatest common factor and factor by grouping in order to solve the first equation and the second equation. So for the first equation, in order to solve it, I'm going to make the right-hand side equals to 0. So I'm going to subtract 80x squared from both sides of the equation. I will get 5x to the fourth minus 80x squared equals 0. Now I'm going to take the greatest common factor from that equation. So that is 5x squared. And then the remaining polynomial is going to be x squared minus 4 equals 0. Now we have two quantities or expressions. Their product is 0, which means either one of them is 0. So if we set 5x squared equals 0, we solve, we get x equals to 0, divide by both sides by 5, and then take the square root. Or x squared minus 4 equals 0, which will give me x squared equals 4, and from there we get x equals positive or negative 2. I will let you think about that and review your information, because you should be already knowing this stuff. For the second one, I'm going to regroup the first two terms together and the last two terms together. So I will regroup like that. And then I'll put a plus sign since there is a minus here. So I will keep the minus with the 9. So now I have from the first binomial, I can take the greatest common factor, which is x squared, out. So what's left between the parentheses is going to be x plus 1. From the second polynomial, so plus, I will take negative 9 out as a common factor, the greatest common factor. So I will get x plus 1. So negative 9x divided by negative 9 is positive x. Negative 9 divided by negative 9 is positive 1 equals 0. Now, notice how these two binomials, I can pull them out as the greatest common factor. So I will pull the greatest common factor. So I will have x plus 1, this is the greatest common factor. So what's left is x squared, positive minus 9 is minus 9 equals 0. And then we're going to set x plus 1 equals to 0 because I have two binomials multiplied or two expression multiplied. Their product is equal to 0. So either one would be equal to 0. The solution for the first one is x equals to negative 1. And then if you set x squared minus 9 equals to 0, then you get x equals positive or negative 3. I'll let you do the steps for that one. It's similar to the previous one. So that is how to solve these types of equations using factoring and the greatest common factor and a combination of both. The absolute value equations. Next, we will learn how to solve an absolute value equation. To solve an equation such as the absolute value of 2x minus 6 equals 8, we notice that the absolute value will be equal to 8 if the quantity inside of the absolute value bars is either 8 or negative 8. Because we know the absolute value removes the negative sign. So that unknown quantity could be equal to 8 or negative 8. That's why this is going to lead us to two different equations that we can solve independently. So when we have the absolute value bars, to remove them, we split our equations into two. Either the amount inside of the absolute value bars is equal to the positive number, or it is equal to the negative number. And then we're going to solve each one of these. So we're going to add 6 to both sides of the equation. We get, for the first one, we get 2x equals 14. We divide by 2, we get x equals 7. Or for the second answer, we get 2x equals negative 2. We divide by 2, we get x equals negative 1. So either one of these answers, if you plug it in there, it will give you the correct answer. Let's try it. So if you remove x and plug 7, we get 2 times 7, 14, minus 6 is 8. 8, the absolute value of 8 is 8. So that is correct. If we plug -1, we get 2 times -1 is -2, minus 6 is -8. Absolute value of -8 is +8, which is correct. So here are the steps to solve any absolute value equation. So isolate the absolute value expression on one side of the equal sign. So the absolute value has to be alone. If it has any other terms, we need to get rid of these terms, whether they are added, subtracted, multiplied, divided. We need to get rid of all. The second step is if C, which is the right-hand side, is bigger than 0 or positive, then we're going to write two equations such that what's inside of the absolute value equals to the positive C, and then the other equation is what's inside of the absolute value equals to the negative C. If C is negative, it's an impossible outcome, and in this case we don't have any solutions because we know that anything inside of the absolute value has to be positive. The absolute value is basically represents a distance, and the distance cannot be negative. If C is equal to 0, if the right-hand side is equal to 0, then we will have just one solution, because -0 is not a thing. So let's solve these examples right here. So I will do this step right like that. So whenever you have an absolute value, you're going to see there is nothing associated with the absolute value, so we can split it up right away. We can say 6x plus 4 equals 8, and 6x plus 4 equals -8. And then we're going to solve the first one. We subtract 4 first, because we do the opposite of PEMDAS. So now we have 6x equals 4. And now we divide both sides by 6, so we get x equals 2 over 3, which is the reduced 4 over 6. And then we subtract 4 from the other one as well. We get 6x equals -12. Divide by 6, both sides, you get x equals -2. So those are the two solutions. Notice how this absolute value is equal to negative, which means we have no solutions in this case. No solution in this case, because it's impossible to have an absolute value that is equal to negative. C, 3x minus 5 in absolute value minus 4 equals 6. Notice how we have -4 associated with the absolute value, so we need to get rid of that first. We're going to add 4 to both sides of the equation before we split. So now we have 3x minus 5 inside the absolute value equals 10. Now we can split it into two equations and solve each one individually. So we will have 3x minus 5 equals 10, or 3x minus 5 equals -10. I'll let you do the rest of the steps. Lastly, we have absolute value of -5x plus 10 equals 0. In this case, this right-hand side is 0, which means we're going to have just one option, because it does not make sense to have -5x plus 10. Let me improve my handwriting. Plus 10 equals 0, and then -5x plus 10 equals -0. There is no such thing here. So we only have one option, so I'm going to erase that. And we're going to have just one option that you can solve. So we have -5x plus 10 equals 0, and then you can solve that question. The final answer is going to be 2.